Thank you for being here, everyone. Welcome to the last meeting of the CCCPAC Climate Change Comprehensive Plan Amendment Committee. Today, we're going to be reviewing what exactly we've been doing over these last couple months and hopefully have a good discussion about how we go about adopting climate change into our comprehensive plan this year, which will pave the way for future climate plan actions. So I'm going to share my screen. All right, can everyone see that? Great. All right. So, all right, we've been over this a bunch of times. Camera's on. Can I get a note taker for today? Preferably someone that hasn't done it yet.
I can do it.
Awesome. Thank you, Crystal.
Mm-hmm.
If you haven't submitted your homework from any of the previous sessions, it's not too late to do so. I'd still appreciate your feedback. So we are here. It's August 23rd. We had 5 different educational sessions. Today we're recapping. I'm not expecting that today will take the whole 2 hours. So unless y'all really want to talk a long time about the proposed comprehensive plan language. And then September 15th, I'll be bringing proposed comprehensive plan amendment language to the Planning Commission to start the legislative process. So just a recap of what we've been doing. We've been learning about different climate change adaptation and mitigation topics, including state and regional requirements. We intend to draft an amendment to the comprehensive plan to incorporate climate change and climate change adaptation and mitigation in a meaningful way, and then adopt a amendment which will help us complete a climate action plan with this grant from Commerce next year. So, you know, again, the city can't do everything related to climate change in Gig Harbor, but we can control who we bring into the conversation and how we think long-term through our comp plan, which is the purpose of this group, giving their feedback to the comprehensive plan. Once we get this into the comprehensive plan, we'll be able to take more robust action through, you know, more direct policies and planning. And then of course we got to implement those things. We have to monitor what we do and evaluate, which means we may end up, you know, adopting different policies and plans as this process evolves. The only constant is change. So this is just a summary of our educational sessions. Most of you were there, so you know what went on. But for the public, we started on May 18th talking about what climate change is and why it's important to address it. June 8th, we had PSRC come and talk to us about regional approaches to climate change and mitigation and adaptation. And I think we all took away a lot about sharing resources and not duplicating work from that meeting. June 22nd, we talked about buildings and energy. I think everyone was pretty amped on electrification and making sure that we don't permit infrastructure that will become obsolete or unhealthy. July 13th, talked a lot about EVs, electric vehicles, how we pave the way for those going forward, how we adapt our land use to make sure that folks use cars less in general and also have a safe way to get around that don't involve cars. And then July 27th, we heard from the Department of Commerce about their plans to bring a climate change mitigation and resilience element to all comprehensive planning jurisdictions. And then Kyla talked to us about waste management in Pierce County and how we can do better. Oh, and I did a little bit about community outreach too. So, did a lot, learned a lot. Looking forward, our comprehensive plan has 13 different elements, and I got feedback from all of you from your little homework sessions, not little homework sessions, from your homework responses. I I categorize them into these different kind of boxes within the comprehensive plan so that they're a little bit easier to digest and a little bit easier to apply once we get to the point that we're ready to talk about them in that way. Not all of these comprehensive plan elements were covered in the homework responses, but we did cover most of them. So some major takeaways from the homework responses that you gave: land use, establish policies and zoning that promote smaller residential uses. And these were just, you know, comments from like one specific person. It doesn't represent the sentiment or the input from this group as a whole. For the harbor element, consider kelp forest preservation and restoration outside the mouth of Gig Harbor. For the housing element, establish building incentives for medium and low income residents to weatherize and retrofit. Community design, I'm not going to read out all of these, and this presentation will be available after this meeting, but this will be a good way for all of you to kind of see what other people were thinking about as they, you know, kind of move through these educational sessions. A lot about electrification here. The environment, a lot about urban forestry and stormwater here, which I think is really great. Public facilities, so, you know, facilities that the city owns and operates. Utilities, so kind of more about electrification and education, like public education. Transportation, also very connected to land use. But yeah, again, a lot about electrification and safety. Capital facilities, so everything kind of in the right of way, everything that helps move stormwater, contain stormwater. Okay, I don't actually think we need a break. I built that in just in case. Although, does anyone have any comments on some of the takeaways or want to talk about anything in particular? Go ahead, Jenny.
So yes, we just met, as council just met with our local lobbyist last week. And we were talking about our goals for 2023 as far as the state legislature is concerned, and what items we want to be watching for. And one of those items that we want to be watching for is anything having to do with climate change. So do we have in here, and I think one of those items might have to do with heat pumps and things like that, that the state, we're expecting a lot of things from the state legislature coming down about climate change. So what the state legislature brings down to us, do we need to put that in a comp plan? And if so, how does it get there?
If it's a state requirement, we're going to, I don't know, maybe Carl can answer this better. Well, I'm not super familiar with comp planning.
Yeah, no, it's okay. It depends on what the requirement is. I mean, sometimes, you know, it might be a requirement that we need to include within our zoning code. But likely, if we're talking about energy, it's likely to be something that Paul would be looking at and adopting. And Paul, I'll let you speak to how often we adopt the new building codes and how that process works.
Yeah, no problem. Anything that's adopted at the state level, as far as construction, energy codes, ventilation, that type of thing, the city is actually required to adopt those when the state does. So typically the cycle is every 3 years, but we do get yearly updates, and those automatically go into play. We basically adopt the state energy code, the state building code, And we have the option to amend that, but we cannot amend it to make it less restrictive. So if the state says everybody needs heat pumps, and they all have to be electric and they have to meet a certain SEER level, we are required to adopt that code. We can make it more restrictive. We can say, if the SEER level at the state is 15, we can say, no, we want 17, and which is really tough. But we absolutely, it's almost a done deal as far as the energy code and any kind of construction type things that are adopted at the state. There are a number of things that we can do in additionally, like say currently there's not a requirement to install electric vehicle infrastructure in single family homes. There is a requirement for some commercial occupancies, which we absolutely enforce that currently. But certain other cities and counties have added provisions to already include infrastructure for EV charging stations, say in single family garages. We can add that in addition to what the state has already adopted, but they're going that direction already anyway. So I anticipate the next code cycle, those provisions will be included as well.
Great, thanks. And that, I guess, all those specifics would be included under 5.5.3. Consider climate change and planning processes. Is that where the Planning Commission comes to us with specifics, or the staff comes with specifics? Is that how that works?
We can get there when we talk about it.
Okay, great.
Yeah,
Thanks.
we're gonna have a space to kind of discuss those, but yeah, you're on the right track. So yeah, to answer your first question, thank you, Paul and Carl. It depends. All right. So our next steps, now that we've kind of gotten all this feedback from y'all, is to amend the comprehensive plan. I drafted a request for qualifications for a climate action plan consultant. We haven't released it as of yet. And then we have until June 2023 to use commerce funding to develop that climate action plan. And so then I'm going to be giving, once we have a consultant on board, I'm going to be giving them all of the feedback that all of you have given, and they may want to talk to you all as a kind of stakeholder body about the climate action plan. We're not there yet, but we definitely would love it if y'all would stay involved, because we have a lot of smart people on this in this group. And then once we have a climate action plan, the consultant will give us some recommendations to move forward that we can adopt within the 2024 comprehensive plan periodic update, because that's kind of a more that periodic update is more of like an overhaul of the comprehensive plan. Okay, so this is the proposed language to adopt this year. We will, of course, be bringing this to Planning Commission and Council, so it will, it's going to be probably edited quite a bit, but I am very interested in what you all think about this language, and if it captures enough, if it doesn't capture enough. Yeah, take a moment to digest, and then I'm happy to take feedback.
And we should note again, maybe Roxy, if I could, that, the idea here is that we're just trying to get climate change back into the comprehensive plan so that
Thank you, Carl.
So that we have license essentially, or some support and basis for creating our action plan. And then the action plan will inform, as Roxy said, will inform that larger discussion of goals and policies that would feed into the 2024 update.
Thank you, Carl. Yeah.
Hey, Roxy, anything on that the diesel that they talked about too, the renewable diesel as a quicker change versus the electrification of all the public fleet?
You
So
mean
the-
as
the
kind of
only-
like the midpoint kind of?
Yeah, because I mean, like right now for, fire department, for all the big rigs, technically electrification is not necessarily available right now.
Okay,
But that renewable diesel is 85% less carbon emitting than standard diesel right now,
okay,
and it's drop and go, so no change to equipment.
okay, cool.
We can help hook you up with that. We've went renewable diesel about 4 years back.
Oh,
How
wonderful.
you guys liking it?
It's fantastic. Actually, so for example, the Patelco and InfoSource fleet that works for PSE, they went to LNG a little while back, I believe about 7 years ago. The problem with LNG is that it runs much hotter. So they lit a few of their trucks on fire, and then they had to do a significant amount of investment in putting heat shields on their trucks. When we went over to the renewable diesel, we didn't change a thing. And we just went straight over, changed the fuel supplier, we've been running all of the line trucks on it, and the water trucks on it for, like I said, about 4 years now. It's worked wonderfully. And actually one of the upsides, the linemen are wonderful people, but they are generally the last people to really engage in change that you might think of as being green. But we immediately had positive feedback because, as you know, in order to run the lifts, you have to idle that engine underneath them in order for the lifts to continue to have power all day. And the fumes from the biodiesel smell like French fries, and they don't choke them. So that was kind of a benefit that we did not see coming. So overall, it's been very popular.
Cool.
Go ahead, Crystal.
Thank you. I was just wondering about the first 5.5.1, the greenhouse gas emissions inventory and baseline.
Mhm.
I remember we talked about this in one of the earlier presentations, and it sounded to me like there is an existing inventory or a new one that's being done countywide that would be valuable to use, and there might not be a real benefit to create a new one just for Gig Harbor. So I'm just kind of wondering like where that was left. Like, is that a good thing to invest your time and money in, or can you use what's already out there?
Yeah, the climate action plan, the proposal that we put together has, developing a baseline inventory of greenhouse gas emissions for the city as kind of like the first step. And we'll advise, we can definitely advise our consultant, not to reinvent the wheel there. And I honestly, looking at other climate action plans, it doesn't seem like people do. They're pulling from like other data sources and kind of compiling it and synthesizing it.
Okay. And
Yeah,
are there
good question.
additional goals here not on this slide?
No,
Or use all of them?
I tried to keep it simple since we will be doing more once we have a climate action plan in place.
Okay.
That doesn't mean that, that doesn't mean this isn't what has to go to planning commission or council. This is why I'm
Right,
asking
right.
y'all if you think I'm missing something.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if planning and adaptation and mitigation for sea level rise, given where Gig Harbor is located, might be more of a priority than like greenhouse gas emissions,
Gotcha.
because that's happening now, right? There's flooding and there's problems with that right now. So yeah, that's my only other thought. Thank you.
Thanks, Crystal.
Mhm.
Robert.
Thank you, Roxanne. I got a couple of questions for you. If I may step back just a little bit, these conversations kind of bring it to mind. You must have some kind of methodology that you use to take all the various recommendations you got to kind of consolidate it into these three. Can you tell us a little bit about your thought process, how that worked, and how how you worked it internally to get to these three? Because there's a lot of stuff that came into you, and this is a pretty thin list.
I know. I think that it was basically which, what kind of points or concerns did I see come up most often across all of the responses that I got. Electrification was huge across a lot of the responses, and so that's why I kind of used it as a priority. And then a lot of the proposals that folks had to do with decreasing emissions or decreasing the use of certain types of technologies and favor of other technologies, and we can't really assess whether replacing something meets a goal unless we have like a baseline. So that's where the greenhouse gas emissions baseline comes from. And then our a lot of the concerns were just around just climate change not being a priority in planning processes. Like land use, housing, all of these things. That's why we don't necessarily have a lot of the technologies or the infrastructure in place that we've been all talking about. So just making sure that we're considering climate change going forward seemed like another logical step. There is a lot that is being left out here, but I think that it would be hard for us to do a climate change specific overhaul of the comprehensive plan without having some recommendations from a consultant that's really looking at it more in depth. I just don't have the capacity to do the kind of study and research that a consultant would.
Yeah, and I would add, Bob, that all of the information and all the ideas, the goals and policies that were submitted by this group are going to be passed along to the consultant as sort of our early work for their consideration. And so we'll still be utilizing all of that information and evaluating it. And some of those ideas and policies could, end up in that 2024 update, depending on, if once they're sort of truthed out, and we have a path laid out for us through that climate action plan. So, these ideas here were just sort of really kind of what we determined are sort of the base elements of what we need to get started and give us just some foothold in order to just get the climate action plan going, because the climate action plan is really where the rubber is going to hit the road.
Good question.
But Roxanne, you mentioned, I sent that note about the summary of all the comments, and you sent me something back. But is that document was the same document you sent out for this we're talking about right now, by the way?
Oh, you want like the spreadsheet with everything in it?
I would have thought, yeah, I would think that all the group would like to see what other people have submitted, because
Oh, okay.
maybe I'm a solo on that, but I'll definitely want to see it when you come in on the 15th to the commission, because that was your baseline document that you kind of extracted these three out of. So we never got a chance, I don't think, to see what everybody else's recommendations were, and it would be probably quite enlightening to see those.
Everything that was in that base document was in those takeaways that we just ran through. And when there were any comments that were kind of the same, I just, omitted that it was said, 2 or 3 times. So in effect, you have seen all the comments, but I'm happy to share that spreadsheet.
Well, that's what the takeaways are. That's fine. Did you then circle back with the council, and did they give you some guidance on this draft?
No, not yet.
Oh, okay, so this is basically a city staff internal recommendation with the assistance of the board.
Yes.
Okay, those are my questions. Thank you.
Good ones. All right, Ryan.
All right. Well, first thing I wanted to say was I thought this was good work on kind of drilling it down to those 3 primary areas. A comprehensive plan amendment is not necessarily where you want to get into establishing the level of detail that you're going to be establishing when you get your true plan out and
Mhm.
the informed climate strategy. So I thought this was good work. And I wanted to say that first of all. Second thing that I wanted to state, referring to an earlier comment on the county-wide emissions plan that will be produced, it's important to note that one of the primary drivers of emissions for most areas is their electric utility.
Mhm.
And Pierce County is primarily served by Puget Sound Energy, which is less than 40% carbon free. Gig Harbor, on the other hand, is served by Peninsula Light Company that is greater than 95% carbon free.
Woo!
So it will be extremely important to make sure that we have a great Gig Harbor specific look when it
Yeah.
comes to baselining of greenhouse gas inventories.
Awesome. That is really great to know. Thank you. Glad we got you on this panel, Ryan. Councilmember Wook.
Yeah, thanks. So yes, this has been a really good informative group that we've had, and lots of good ideas have come from it. I know there have been lots of conversations around trees and the urban forest. Is that too specific to be mentioned anywhere on here?
I don't necessarily think so. I guess we could run it by planning commission, see what they think. We are developing, we have our kickoff meeting with our urban forestry consultant tomorrow. So we're gonna have a whole
She'll be back in a minute. Yeah. So it just seems to me that urban forest has a lot to do with climate change and affecting that. So
I think that's a great point, Jenny. And we certainly, you froze up there, Roxy, so we lost you
Oh.
for a minute. Sorry. If you want to continue your thought, go ahead.
Oh, just yeah, I'm not sure what y'all heard, but we're meeting with our tree consultant tomorrow. And yeah, that the tree plan will definitely inform the comp plan update. We could run it by the planning commission, you know, and see what they think about including trees. I'm sure they'll probably want to do that, but I can't speak for them.
right. I just didn't know if it, you know, it seems to me the 5.53 is like from a 30,000-foot look.
Absolutely, yeah.
And when you start digging down in, I didn't know if trees were down too specific to fit into somewhere on here, but running by the planning commission is a great idea. So thanks.
I mean, yeah, the 5.53, just like considering climate change in all processes, that I think is like the way that we kind of tee ourselves up to be more, you know, intentional about these types of things going forward, because, you know, there isn't always like kind of a, I think maybe because we're using best management practices, a lot of times, you know, it's there, but it's a way of being, yeah, again, more intentional.
Yeah, thanks.
And I think if I could jump in, I think that's a really good point that both Jenny and Bob have brought up here, that and others, you know, that we do have all these other goals that people have submitted and other ideas. And certainly, you know, we're taking this through planning commission. That's all part of that record, you know, that we'll be bringing to them. And so I think at that time, you know, if the planning commission finds that there are things in there that they feel are important, that still meet that sort of high level threshold that we're looking for, as you were just kind of describing, Jenny, I think, you know, that they can then entertain those ideas as part of their recommendation back to council.
Kyla.
Yeah, I think Roxy, this is a really good plan to, I like this, you know, kind of plan you've laid out for, and we include this kind of general statements in the amendment this year so that we could do a climate action plan and then get really more specific in the comprehensive plan periodic update in 2024. I think that this is a strong way to go. Like, you know, I think it makes sense. And I think there's maybe a couple of opportunities in the language here to get a little bit more specific if you want, like what Councilmember Wilk was just saying, maybe you include carbon sequestration as one of those elements that you're going to look at in the climate action plan. And that I think would align with like carbon forest or the urban forestry plan. And also lots of other kind of adaptation benefits. I was also a little bit curious about the community outreach part of the climate action plan. Are you expecting the consultant to produce recommendations on how to conduct community outreach related to the climate action planning process, or just like climate action in general? And there might be an opportunity to add in something there too about the planning process being an equitable community engagement process, sort of like the recommendations that you shared with us at the last meeting.
Yeah, we expect that the scope of work for the climate consultant will be conducting public outreach. So they'll have, yeah, they'll be definitely doing that with regard to the climate action plan. But yeah, this is great.
Yeah, and I think so you could even include here, I guess, more specific recommendations then for like requirements of the consultants and the way you want them to conduct community outreach, right? I think also for thinking about the greenhouse gas baseline inventory, it could be a little bit more specific about, is it a geographical, community-wide greenhouse gas inventory, or are we doing an inventory of Gig Harbor, government operations that would inform the electrification of public assets piece, or are we doing both? Those are also things to consider. And then I think climate action plans, having looked at many different communities' climate action plans, they come in a lot of different shapes and sizes. So there are ones that are very greenhouse gas emission focused, so really heavy on the mitigation side. There are those that are both mitigation and adaptation. There are ones that are just adaptation and resilience. So I think that's something to think about too. And I see here that you've included mitigation and strategies for adaptation. And I wonder if it's worth going a step farther to think about community resilience and get to maybe some of those more interdisciplinary issues that come up with climate action planning, like thinking about workforce development and economic development issues, and affordability of housing and some of these other kind of issues that we've seen come up in a lot of the presentations that intersect with climate issues.
Cool. Thank you. Paul.
I think something I just wanted to mention was along the lines of what Kyla had just said regarding the assessment. We, Gig Harbor, small town, right? But based on, the vehicle miles per capita, we've got Highway 16 where we have between 80 and 90,000 vehicles that travel right through the middle of our city every day. As far as the scoping to our consultant, it doesn't seem like, even though, we have no control over Highway 16, and we don't want for necessarily those miles to affect our response. We can't mitigate, or should our citizens, I guess is the question, try to mitigate miles that are driven by people that basically are transient, right through and don't spend time here. So, there's only, we just want to, I guess, for our citizens, for there to be a fairness and it's not to have to try to save the world, just our little part, right?
Sure. Yeah, I think I see what you're saying. Like, I think the intent of the greenhouse gas emissions was to do community-wide. As Kyla said, there's lots of different ways to go about it. But Bainbridge Island, they were a very early kind of developer of a climate action plan, but they also have a very high income. And it was kind of interesting to see that a lot of their emissions in the community came from airline flights, like these people, because it's like wealthier people that fly a lot. And it's like, oh, those are things that folks can control. We can also control, how much people drive with, safer streets for walking, biking, etc. But yeah, I think you're right. We don't necessarily need to capture the emissions of someone driving from Tacoma to Poolsbo. Okay. Thank you all. These are really helpful. Who haven't we heard from? Stina or Mike, any comments? Okay. All right, let's see what else we have. So yeah, we have kind of the next few months mapped out with the legislative process, but depending on recommendations from the Climate Action Plan and how council wants to go with this, there's a potential for an ongoing climate change body, which it would be really great to see some of our external stakeholders stay involved with climate planning in Gig Harbor. And then of course we'll have, climate change projects and different implementation and monitoring projects that will be going on once we get more policies in place, because it seems like our current council is really is taking a strong interest in making sure Gig Harbor moves forward with the what is it, the 20? Yeah, we're in the 21st century or the 22nd? 21st. Yeah, okay. The last 2 years were really long. Okay. Okay, as always, you can contact me. You can use my cell phone there, the mobile, and then yeah, email me with any other resources or comments that you have. Feel free to mark up. I sent you that memo with the proposed comp plan amendment language. Feel free to, open that in whatever kind of word editing software you have and mark it up and send it back to me. I welcome all your comments. I'll have to have my memo and report put together for Planning Commission by September 8th. So let's say have your comments to me by September 7th, if you don't mind, which is like 2 weeks. I think that's pretty manageable. Thank you all so much for committing your time. Really appreciate all the yeah, really great feedback and energy you put into this group. So take care, and hopefully we get this through the comp plan amendment process without too much hassle. Yeah, Carl.
Sorry, Roxy, I wanted to ask you, so did you, you had written up this summary of the initial meetings. Did that go out to this group?
Yeah.
Oh, it did? Okay.
Mhm.
Did everybody get that in addition to the policies? Okay, I'm sorry, I missed that. I was looking for the
Oh.
email, didn't see it, but
Oh, I didn't get that.
you didn't get it?
No,
Oh, weird.
that's
We'll
what I
make-
was referring to, Roxy. That's the one that you talked about that in your memo. Initial summary of meetings and something or other.
Yeah, the initial meeting summary and findings. I was just looking at the email that you sent out earlier, and it only had the just these goals and policies associated with it. So we should probably make sure that document.
Yeah, I'll make sure everybody gets that. Okay.
It's got a lot of really good information in it.
Okay. Cool.
Really
I'll
useful.
resend that.
And then I also wanted to note, and maybe you already said this, Roxy, and I was typing and missed it, but when we get into the Planning Commission and that process, those meetings are all public, and you're all welcome, of course. And if you have any follow-up ideas or anything like that, please feel free to kind of keep this an open door and reach out to us with any thoughts and additional information that you might have as we're going through the process. And then I know we'll be re-engaging with this group down the road.
Cool. Thanks,
That's it.
Carl.
Sorry.
Don't be sorry. Okay, everyone. Short meeting today. So I hope you get to reclaim some of that time to do something awesome in the good weather. All right. Take care.